Today's guest is Alan Gradzki, youngest of 12 children and father of 3 who are now adult children. Let's catch a glimpse of what this was like about financial education traveling through their family. Alan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you have a very extensive career in the financial services.
I do.
But I want to know what put you in the path of financial services. Tell me about who were the influencers.
Well, my biggest influence was my dad. My dad always dabbled in Wall Street and the stock market, he used to call it back then. And he saw that I didn't have a lot of specific direction when I was getting ready to graduate college. I was an economics major and I wanted to go into something in finance. I didn't quite know what at 22 years old. And he sort of pushed me and said, I think this is something you would like and give it a try and let's see where it goes.
So did your father also have a degree in financial and some kind of business or economics?
No, my dad never finished high school, so he, was brought into the war. World War II is what he fought in. So just before finishing high school, and so he took a different direction. He took the long way to financial success, I'll call it.
So, he took the time to point you in a direction, and I'm just, as a mother of 4, I'm thinking, by the time you get down to number 12, how much energy do you have left to point somebody in the right direction? So, major props to your parents for that. But why was he so in tune with that? He didn't finish high school. Tell me a little, I've got to know more about him.
Yeah, so people ask him, how did you do so well for someone who had 12 children? And his answer would be, well, I had one child and I had made a little money, and I had 2 children and I had made a little more money. And I was kind of, I don't think he quite knew exactly, he just knew he took I will get there in time and just keep plugging away at the little things that I think bring you financial success, which is really time, investing, and being careful with your money. And my parents were always obviously very careful, having come from nothing. They grew up during the Depression era. Their parents went and stood on the soup lines, the infamous soup lines of the late 20s, and to waiting for soup for them to bring home to the family. So once my dad got back from the war, they went and were living in a boarding house, and that was very common. A boarding house, you didn't have a bathroom in your house, you had a bathroom down the hallway. That's how it worked. And once they started having children, my sisters and in this case my brother, they eventually moved into a home, and at that time built brand new, which obviously cost very little back in the early 50s. But that was like Shangri-La to them. Having a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that was 1,200 square feet was, wow.
For how many kids at this point?
I think at that point they had 4. In a
3-bedroom.
In a 3-bedroom, but that was, again, my mother used to say this was like, wow, I just moved into Hollywood. She used to just joke around about it. I'm like, really? So, well, compared to what you had, everything was a step up. So little by little, and her and my dad really, I think she's instrumental in it as well, because she was right there in step with him to say, I'll do whatever we need to do, watch money, be careful, not spend too much, and also help him in the businesses. He was an entrepreneur. So.
Businesses. Okay, so now you've mentioned 2 things that I feel like we need to unpack. You mentioned he invested, and now you say businesses, multiple, and I do appreciate so much when I see couples working together. So very impressive that your mother was able, and he also had the respect for her that they could work alongside each other. Yeah. So tell me, what did he invest in, or what were these businesses that he did?
He started out in, and I believe the first business he had was a chicken business, believe it or not.
Chicken?
Yeah, takeout chicken business. He moved very quickly and into owning a liquor store, which was attached to a supermarket, which he also purchased later on. That was a few years down the road, and I still had the original documents, I think, or the original advertisement when he opened up the liquor store. It was open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And I said, how did you work all these hours? Well, he said, your mom worked some hours, I worked some hours. We kind of flip-flopped, did whatever we had to do. And
with 12 kids?
We weren't 12 kids yet. So we got, when I was born in 1968, and then they purchased the supermarket a few months after I was born, and then there's an advertisement on the front page, or not, wasn't the front page of the paper, but it says Gradzki buys supermarket to feed family. And so
I love that headline.
And I mean, obviously they made it, a little tongue in cheek, but they did so to, to say, hey, it wasn't as uncommon as it sounds. I mean, yes, 12 kids is uncommon, but Our neighbors had 5 kids. One of our other neighbors had 10. I mean, they were just down the block. I mean, I was like, God. And so I grew up thinking this was normal. I was the 12th child, so I grew up and there was just a lot of people in my house all the time.
I guess this is how it is.
Yeah, and so it was organized chaos, I call it. And it wasn't that organized, but we did our best. And I used to think the house was so big, and looking back, and I drive past it sometimes, it was not big. So how we did it, I don't know. And I guess it's just a different era when you can appreciate what you have when you had nothing before. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I can imagine he wasn't somebody who just put money under the mattress then. And did he put a lot of money away at a bank, physically put it away as opposed to keeping it under the mattress?
When he started and I believe it was when he first opened the liquor store, and I guess he had some money saved, and his accountant actually came to him and said, hey, they're looking for investors in a local community bank that they want to start up. Would you be willing to invest? They're looking for a $25,000 investment. In 1955, that was a lot of money. So he said he talked it over with my mom, and when the accountant came back a few days later, he said, what do you think? Are you interested? He said, I'd like to invest $50,000, but I want to be on the board of directors. And at that time, obviously now that doesn't work that way. You get voted in, and it goes through a big long process. And he's like, I'll ask him. It can't hurt. And he came back a week later or whatever it was and said, okay, you're in.
But what gumption? I mean, who thinks like that? Who thinks like that?
He figured, what do I have to lose? I mean, you're asking me for what at that time was probably, he didn't say it was all of what he had, but it was a lot of money he had saved over the years, since coming out of the war. And he didn't feel like he should sell himself short. He's like, I just took a chance. He's like, back then, you had to take a chance. He's like, you didn't want to, it felt right. It was his community bank. They were looking to it was actually an actual branch right nearby. They weren't going to pay him. They were just going to simply put him on the board of directors and pay him in stock. And so he would get paid, I think it was annually he got paid in a sort of a stock.
Oh, but that was so instinctive of him. I mean, let's remind everyone, he didn't even finish high school. So where did he get this financial acuteness to, all the decisions that he could possibly make? Where did it come from? Do you know?
I would say it was just his nature. I mean, as a person, the way he, would tell us, he was very big on save, save, save. And I think as he got older, I saw that evolve into, save, but you still got to enjoy your life. And he backed off that idea a little bit, but back in the 40s, you had to save. Everybody used to say everybody was poor. It was no who's got the money, who doesn't. It was pretty much 95% of people were in the same boat. So you had to go off in a different direction at some point. Nothing like it is today, I think.
So your parents worked, hours. I mean, most of the hours of the daylight, probably well into the night and the early mornings. They also had eventually 12 children, and we're still carrying this on. Do you feel like they enjoyed their life?
Yes. I used to say to my parents, especially when they retired, I was only, when they retired, I was young still. I was out of college, just getting out of college. We used to say, you guys have the money now. You've saved all your lives. Go enjoy it. Like, we do enjoy. We have a little condo in Florida. I think they paid $20,000 for it. I mean, like, they could have bought a bigger one. Why? That's all we need. We're happy. We never had a condo. Nobody had a condo. I mean, back in our day, he's like, when we were young, we never even thought that was possible. We didn't know it existed. So I think that's where the appreciation that they, really enjoyed. And my mother used to say, you're probably not going to need quite as much money in retirement as you think you're going to need, because once you've got a chance to do certain things, and you get to a place where you're just happy, number one, to be healthy and alive, as you grow into your older retirement, but also just you've already experienced a lot of things just through the course of your lifetime. They took us. We used to go to Disney. I think we went there when Disney World first opened in Florida in 1973. I remember I have pictures of me on the little buggies, and I said, didn't they just opened that year? It was their inaugural year for the actual park. So it was a big deal, but we drove. We drove in a station wagon. I think it was like 7 of us that drove down with my parents. I don't know how you did this, the 20-hour drive from New Jersey to Florida. And that was common. You couldn't afford to get on a plane. We could have, but we weren't going to do it. We were going to save the money, and so we had money for the parks. And back then, it was a little more reasonable, I think.
Well, and that's really interesting. Taking the time to be frugal in certain areas, but splurging in others.
Yeah.
Do you share the same perspective of money that your parents had?
I think I do. I've learned. I drive a very inexpensive car, but I also like to play golf a lot, which is not a cheap sport, and it's something that I just love for the love of the game and the camaraderie and the social aspect of the game, which is a big part of it. So I'm willing to, spend money on the things I really love, and I have no problem, driving a car that people would be like, why don't you get something nice? This is fine. It's great. So I think I did learn to appreciate the things that I really love, and I hate when I spend money on something and I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't spent that money. It's buyer's remorse I'm having. So on occasion you have that.
What are the things that your parents taught you that you've now passed down to your children? Ooh, wait, let me make this better. That stuck. So things that your parents taught you that you passed down to your children and it stuck with them.
I think the one thing that they really pushed was, try to find something you at least enjoy doing, because you're going to be doing it your whole life. But try to make money, because you're not going to be happy if you're always, struggling with money, or you're always trying, because, inflation doesn't stop going. The cost of, everything, houses and everything in society doesn't go lower, it goes higher. So if you're not making enough money, or you're not able to at least get there at some point, whether it takes you years to get there or not, you're not going to be happy. And that was something I've always told my children as well. I'm like, I want you to be happy. I want you to find that, something that you really at least have some passion toward. And I think the money will eventually come. I know we hear that a lot, but it does. I think it did for me. It took a long time. I could have went a couple different routes in financial services, and I took maybe a little longer, maybe a little more conservative way, but I was still happy with what I did. So I felt it worked. And my kids are young adults, but they're working their way toward that. So,
what were money conversations like at home for you with your kids?
When they were younger, I wouldn't say I had direct money conversations. Maybe it was more about what money could do for you and what was really important. We grew up in an area where there were pretty expensive homes, and I used to say to them, don't worry about what the neighbor has. I mean, you can't think about that. And one day, even if you can't live in a bigger home or whatever, as long as you're safe, you're happy, you're around people you want to be with, and you're good. I wouldn't directly speak to money other than, if something was just too ridiculously expensive or something just didn't make sense to purchase, I would say, do you really need that? And my kids were pretty reasonable. They were actually pretty easy kids growing up. They weren't I want this and I want that. They didn't do that very often, which is why I think sometimes I felt the need to ask them, because I think they felt like they were bothering me. Like, oh, Dad, is it okay if we get this? Or, that's the type of kids they were. So I think I was lucky in that respect. That's part of their personalities.
I think that the issue that we have with financial education that I think needs to be highlighted is that we're looking at really a social justice issue, because it's not about, you mentioned about it's what money can do. It's not about that everyone doesn't have access to the same amount of money. What I think is really lacking, what seems to be lacking, is the information. And so people don't have the information to make the right decisions. Two people could come over to America with the same amount of money. One may become a multimillionaire and one may stay in poverty.
Sure.
And so, what are some of the principles that you feel need to get highlighted, the information that we need to be pushing out? I mean, it sounds like not only do you have kids with very amicable personalities, but you were able to really guide them in how to think about money and what do you really want or what do you really need. Are there any other things that parents or even us that are in financial services could help highlight? Our top 3 things that we really think we need to put emphasis on for our children.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, and I see what my father did that some of his peers did not, was investing. In his case, it was the stock market. It could have been real estate, or he did actually own some real estate that he purchased back in the day when it was very inexpensive to buy, let's say, a fixer-upper type of home that you use for investment purposes. But I think you have to have some money to first invest, right? Whether it's in the stock market, whether it's to purchase a home, even for investment purposes. You can leverage, you can do that kind of thing. And that's what I've started to tell my kids as they've gotten older, and they know they're getting near that cusp of one just finished college, two are closer to finishing college, where they'll eventually have some money to invest, and they're already thinking like that. They're starting to understand. I can start speaking to them at a different level to say, this is stuff that, yeah, you have to start thinking about once you start making some money. You have to maybe take a chance. Maybe it's not going to be, it's going to be a well chosen chance. You're not just going to go make quick decisions. But I think what I saw, and I do know this from one of my uncles, he lived a much more conservative life because he didn't take those chances. And my parents used to say, we tried to get, Uncle so-and-so to come in on this, and he just, no, I'm afraid to take that chance. And it did leave him further and further behind as time went on. I was like, So I did notice that, and that was something that stuck with me because I actually lived briefly when I was in college in between summers with that uncle. And he was a very happy person, him and my aunt, but they definitely didn't, you could see how they were much more conservative with their money. And I think they didn't enjoy their retirement as much as they probably could have had they taken those chances when they were younger.
And it's interesting because you bring up this idea of being conservative with your money, being okay and patient with a slow build in your career, and the consistency being key to building the financial wealth as opposed to looking for it to 10x your money in a day. But I do hear notes of your parents taking risks and you also taking some risks, and then comparing to other people that you've seen haven't taken as much risk. So there is a lot of variance I'm seeing between risk and risky.
I've done risky, and that didn't usually work out when I was younger. And I also didn't take one or two different forks in the road that I think may have led me down a potentially much better path, I'll say, a much more lucrative path. I took the more conservative approach, and I think it held me back, looking back, and with a firm, back in, some people might remember Lehman Brothers, and they collapsed. But years before that, I was essentially offered a position, in their company, and it could have taken me a much different path. And it was an opportunity that I kind of kicked myself for a long time. But at the same time, I was happy with where I was. It wasn't like I was unhappy. It wasn't like I wasn't doing well. I just, it was probably a chance I should have taken, looking back. So you're always going to have those. There's always those
hindsight.
And hindsight's 20/20. And so, I look back and I tell my kids those stories. I tell them, maybe not specifics, but I tell them about things I should have taken. And then when they ask me, and they will ask me, what about this? I'm like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. And I give them the reasons why I think, and you make that choice. But I said, I want to tell you why I think it might be a bad idea, and what I'm seeing. My son is in his first job, and he's looking, another company is looking to hire him, and then the first company wants to counter, and I'm like, let's talk about that first, and don't just go look at the money. And he's not. He's also saying, well, I can get more licenses in engineering for this and that. And I said, yeah, that's the stuff. You're only 22 years old. I said, you have a long way to go. So you can very quickly grow your career without having to make a decision on which one is the best, just on a couple $1,000s or whatever it might be in difference in salary.
But it sounds like you're creating an environment where you're exposing your children to risk, to also being conservative, to a severe footing in savings, and then a clear identity in wants and needs.
Yeah, it's a fine line, right? I mean, you want them to be happy. You want them to be careful with their money. You don't want to see them broke, because then I don't want them asking to live in my basement. So, at some point, I know they're not in that direction, but I also want to help them. And if I can, if I have an extra room, I want you to save that money so you can eventually invest. I want you to everyone needs someone, can be a family member, can be a friend. You need that step up and that help at times, I think, to get to the next level. I had it. I had my parents saying, don't go get your own place. That's, after college, don't live with your friends. It's going to cost way too much money. Just stay for a little while. And they were very big on that. Even if it wasn't what you wanted or you didn't feel comfortable, you really wanted to get out of your parents' house and all that. And they were right, looking back. They were right. There was no way I was making anywhere near enough money to live that life. I would have been just living, paycheck to paycheck.
Well, I love what I'm hearing because it's so common for financial services to get so focused on communicating financial concepts that we forget to lace in the fact that we need to be happy in life.
Yeah.
So I think that that is a very valuable point that you made, and how you just integrate that in your conversations with your kids. And I think that I can see very clearly how it came down from your parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
I so appreciate your insight and perspective. Thank you for being here today.